Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of the podcast You're Just Stupid, the podcast that makes you smarter and stupider at the same time. I'm Ray, aka the Gobbler, and my co-host here is Rene, aka Krusty the Cumsock.
Hey kids!
It's pretty good, right? That's close to the real Krusty the Clown.
It's 4 out of 10.
Yeah, that's about what I would give it to.
4 out of 10.
Yeah.
A lot of women also give me that same number too.
That well, huh?
That was higher than I was expecting, actually.
Oh, you rounded out. Oh, okay. Well,
3.8 out of 10.
Rene, everyone. So I'm in the dark this episode. I don't know what the hell is going on.
So actually, I hate to burst your bubble on this one, Ray, but you actually do kind of know what this one's about. And the reason why, so one of the things when Ray and I were forming this podcast, guys, little behind the scenes look at the podcast here is that we pretty much said, hey, no rules. We're doing our podcast just how Ray and I live our lives. No rules, no boundaries, no pants. Neither one of us are wearing pants right now.
May I interject for a second?
Yes.
Because then we had to decide there were a couple rules.
There were indeed a couple rules.
Because there are a couple words that we had to put on the no say on the podcast. We just don't say it.
There were a couple. Okay, yeah, and then we did a.
Other than that, no rules.
Yeah, like the following rules. The following words are not used. Beep, another beep. Ray, put another beep over this one too.
Oh, I have to figure out how to edit and do that, but I will.
Okay, beep.
Cool.
All right, and yeah, we don't say any of those words. But Ray also made one other condition on me. She's like, "Look, Rene, you're a giant fucking nerd, and I swear to God, if you bring up fucking Dungeons and Dragons in your goddamn this podcast, I'm gonna quit, and you're gonna be fired, and it's gonna just be Ray talking to herself for an hour." And then that didn't market well, and so she had to bring me back in.
I don't market well with myself. I need a man. Because women aren't funny, especially by themselves.
First of all, you're fucking hilarious. And second of all, yeah, we're talking about Dungeons and Dragons. This is a part where all of our female listeners are like, "Oh, I'm out. No, next episode.
Sorry, Mom. I'll see you next episode." Yeah, Who knows?
Ray's mom.
Be a good episode.
Ray's mom. This is. I promise this will be a decent episode. Hey, you know what else we're going to talk about today?
What?
Satan, the devil. Yeah, so all the people who thought this was going to be a complete nerd episode, no. So today I wanted to use the D&D Satanic Panic as a good overall framework for moral panics.
D&D's been around that long?
D&D's been around since the 70s.
Oh, shit, I thought it was like, I don't know. Oh, don't turn off my lights, please. I'm trying to podcast.
That's interesting.
Okay. Anyway, I might be in the dark.
Anyways, but yeah, no, seriously, I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of D&D, but I actually want to go to the thing that's even older than D&D, and I want to talk about it first.
Let's do it.
Let's talk about Satan, or specifically Satanism.
Okay.
So when you think of Satanism, Ray, what do you think of? Like, if I walked up to you and I was like, "Hey, Ray, my name's Rene. I'm a Satanist." What would you think of me? Like, what would be your like? What would you think I do as like my practice?
I would think that you like killing things like cats and rabbits, and you like to have pentagrams drawn everywhere and light shit on fire.
So the first one's completely not true. That's the biggest stereotype of Satanists actually is animal sacrifice or any kind of sacrifice. But so the pentagrams is definitely true. They use a lot of pentagrams, and well, everyone likes shitting on fire. I actually do like shitting on fire. I'm a guy. Fire is good, but I kind of want to briefly, and the reason why I say briefly is I think this might be like Satanism, and the founder of modern Satanism might be worth its own episode itself. Because it's interesting. The guy, if you get time, guys, Google Anton LaVey. He legitimately looks like a fucking supervillain. Like bald head, Fu Manchu beard, big rings, big pointed eyebrows, huge ears. Like
Where is he from?
He's an American. He's an American. Yeah, the founder of modern Satanism is an American.
Interesting.
In fact, and his nicknames include the Father of Satanism, the Saint Paul of Satanism, the Black Pope, and the evilest man in the world. So if you don't think
That's
any
his
of
nickname.
that's one of his nicknames. I mean, I think other people gave it to him, or actually, honestly, this guy's such a showman. He might have given that to himself. He's an interesting guy. I won't get too much into him today because, like I said, I think I want to do an episode on him. Like he's an interesting guy. He's very charismatic. But basically, what he founded was he was a start of modern day Satanism, or what they call LaVeyan Satanism. It is named
Okay.
after him. His full name is Anton Suzander LaVey. So if that doesn't sound like a James Bond villain, alias, I don't know what else it sounds like. But anyways, what he what he based Satanism on, first of all, it's actually non-theistic. Most LaVey Satanists are actually atheists. They don't
How can
worship.
you be an atheist and a Satanist at the same time?
They don't worship Satan. So Satan's kind of more of like either a mascot or like a philosophy. So like by embracing Satan, it's not so much that they worship Satan, is that they're renouncing common Judeo-Christian beliefs. So like Satanism, basically, kind of long story, is very materialistic. It's very individualistic, and it rejects things like body soul dualism, the supernatural, life after death. Basically, it's a religion that, in its negative aspects, you could say teaches you to be selfish, self-centered, materialistic. But in a positive aspect, it also promotes the self, promotes having good, being inward focused. Having compassion, having love. Not depraving yourself of anything. Like Satanism says, hey, if you and another person are consensual, have sex. Hey, if you want to eat 4 cheeseburgers right now, you can. Hey, if you want to get drunk or get high tonight, you can.
So it's like a libertarian.
Kind of, yeah, kind of. I would say it's I don't it's not really political in this, but it's basically a rejection of common. So like if like there's like here these are the satanic statements. I'm just gonna say real quick. Satan represents indulgence instead of abstinence, vital existence instead of spiritual pipe dreams, undefiled wisdom instead of hypocritical self deceit, kindness to those who deserve it instead of love wasted on ingrates, vengeance instead of turning the other cheek, responsibility to the responsible instead of concern for what they call psychic vampires. Man is just another animal who, because of his divine spiritual intellectual development, has become the most vicious animal of all. Satanism represents all the sins, and they all lead to physical, mental, and emotional gratification. Satan has been the best friend the church has ever had, and has kept us in business all these years. And the sins of Satanism are stupidity, pretentiousness, slopism, self-deceit, herd conformity, lack of perspective, forgetfulness of past orthodoxies, counterproductive pride, and lack of aesthetics. So it actually has a lot of tenets to it. It's actually kind of interesting. There's actually a satanic Bible, and it actually lays all this out, and it's all basically based on LaVey's thoughts, and basically you can see where, while being it can be very much a religion for people very egotistical, very
I don't know. I can kind of get down
it
with
kind
this.
of has some interesting ideas too. Yeah, yeah. It's kind of, and they don't sacrifice animals. They do have some rituals and ceremonies, and they have magic, but it's not in the same way of like we're gonna use it to summon demons. Like it's very much just doing things to help like promote yourself and others too. It's not like you'll stab someone in the back. It's like, hey, if you want to do better by yourself and I want to do better by myself, why can't we get along, get together, and do better? And it's kind of interesting. It's also very much a middle finger to like traditional Judeo-Christian Islamic values. And I even, when I was doing research on this episode, a lot of people say modern day Satanists are like the trolls of the religious world. They're basically, to me, like atheists, but if atheists were a little less, they're not as haughty as some atheists can be.
Right.
It's very interesting. So overall, and really, when Satanism really started developing in the '60s, really starting really more about like early mid '70s, and I want you to remember that time period, and really
Hmm.
started getting popular in the '80s, because there's two other things we're going to talk about today that got really popular in the '80s and form on this episode today. Would you like to
Music.
talk about?
Sorry, did I
Oh,
ruin that?
actually, you know what? 5 things. Let's do five
Oh my
things.
god.
Five, but
How well was this episode
yeah,
researched?
exactly. No, but like, shut up, Ray. No, but So the other two I'm not going to talk about today. They might be their own super episodes. And the second one is music. So especially rock and roll, heavy
Mm-hmm.
rock. It was popular already in the 60s and 70s. You can think of like, Black Sabbath and all that. But like really when people started getting really concerned about, especially stuff like Judas Priest and stuff like that, was like in the 80s. And yeah, the rise of rock and roll, and also what else? Two other things that became real big popular in these. Let's think a little bit more nerdy. One of them we won't talk about. I won't spoil it, but it's video games. Video games started becoming a really big thing in the 80s. Atari started in like the late 70s, but really in the 80s was Atari, and then the rise of Nintendo. And that's when video games really started. Like the Nintendo Entertainment System came out in the late '80s, and so that's when video games got popular. And then finally, the other thing that I want to kind of focus on today was Dungeons and Dragons started becoming popular in the '80s.
Mm-hmm.
And one last thing that got popular in the '80s, I know you won't guess. Well, you know what? Shoot, I'll give you one last guess. What do you think also got really popular in the '80s? And
Uh,
it's something that's not fun. It's not fun like video games or D&D or music or any of that.
Long hair for men.
I mean, well, yes, that got popular in the 80s, but no, I was going to say evangelical Christianity.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah, and that we'll come back to that one though. We'll come back to that one.
okay.
So, anyways, I also want to give a brief background on Dungeons and Dragons. I'm not going to go into whole big spiel, Ray. Calm down, calm down. I'm not going to fucking nerd out on all of
I almost
our.
checked out right then.
Yeah, she got even more pale. Her eyes got glassy. She blanked out on me for a moment.
You guys
No,
are allowed to press the stop button and change this. I'm not allowed to. I
no,
have to
no,
sit and listen
no,
to it.
no. You guys want to listen to the whole episode? It's gonna be a great episode. Shut up, Ray. It's gonna be a great one, or a good one, or hopefully even a decent one. But anyways, no. The reason why I'm not giving background just because I played the game. Yes, if I had alluded to, yes, I played the game, but I want to give a framework as to what D&D is about because it's going to be important during the episode, and then I want to have a summary at the end that brings up why this is important. Okay,
All
so
right.
very briefly, Dungeons and Dragons is what we
Give me the
call
framework. Just the framework. Don't fill in
the
the
very yeah.
painting.
This is the one paragraph introduction. There, the least nerdy thing I can do. Anyways,
Love it.
so D&D is what we call a role-playing game that was founded by two gentlemen, one by the name of Gary Gygax and the other one by Dave Arneson in 1974. It's a role-playing game where you basically a bunch of people get together, they make their own characters and they're fantasy characters. You're a wizard, you're a knight, you're a warrior, and you just go on adventures led by someone called the Dungeon Master. He's or she is a person who basically creates the rules of this universe. And Dungeons and Dragons is a set of rules and other framework that you can play a game. And the idea is that you and a group of people, your friends, your family, whoever, get together and imagine and have fun, and it's fantasy. And the reason why I say all that because when I was watching all these specials, all the Dateline and Oprah Winfrey and all the other stuff that talk about this in the '80s, like they go to this fantasy world, and these people are crazy because they use their imaginations, and it's so funny to hear it like then because now it's like we have fans of Harry Potter and Lord of the
Mm.
Rings and Star
Yeah.
Wars, and it's like these are good things. Like having an imagination is a good thing. It's so funny to hear. But anyways,
How they turn it
how
to.
they turn it.
Yeah.
So it's founded in 1974 and it's fairly popular. And but really where I want to skip forward to is 1979, and we're gonna go into the life of one James Dallas Egbert III.
Ooh.
He's a young man in '79. He's just starting college at the University of Michigan, and I'll kind of give a few spoilers about him. He was depressed. He had always was a homosexual man in the late '70s, and you can
Mm.
imagine. And he had an overbearing mom, and he was into drugs. So you can
What a
imagine
great combo.
he has a lot of life stress on him, and he started. But the thing is, he's very intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people do they describe him as he's a computer science guy. So he's a nerd. Let's be honest. No, shout out to the computer science majors out there.
Nerds are cool now.
Yeah, nerds are cool now. I
I
mean, even
love that about this generation. Nerds are
yeah.
cool.
I
As
mean,
they should be.
even I'm mildly cool. I'm a giant fucking nerd.
You just think that because your mom tells you you're cool.
She's not wrong.
Oh, it's special. Sorry.
She's not wrong
Not
about that
cool. I
either.
said I meant
She,
special.
she's not wrong about either one of those things. Ray, shut up. Anyways, shut up, Ray. So he plays Dungeons and Dragons. But among other things, is his depression gets so bad that he tries to commit suicide. And
Hmm.
kind of interesting enough, his first time he commits suicide, he decides to go to the like the sewers and like steam tunnels that are underneath the university. And the reason why he knows these steam tunnels is because him and his friends would go down there and play Dungeons and Dragons sometimes down there to get more atmospheric.
What a great spot to play Dungeons and Dragons.
I've never played Dungeons and Dragons in steam tunnels, so this guy definitely had at least a one interesting D&D session. But anyways, so he goes down there. He tried to commit suicide by overdosing. He doesn't. It
Hmm.
fails. He wakes up the next day, and so he moves on. And after that, he kind of disappears. So his parents hire a private investigator by the name of William Deere to find him. So he goes to his dorm room, and he's looking around, and he notices two interesting things. One, a seeming like a map of these steam tunnels, which he thought was weird. And then he knows that he was into this game called Dungeons and Dragons, and he finds out eventually that yeah, he went down to these steam tunnels to play this game, and people seem to last allude that he went to these steam tunnels. He doesn't find him there, but then he's
Hmm.
gone, and he
Hmm.
keeps eventually he chases them all over America, eventually to Louisiana. But he's thinking that, he went there to kill himself and he plays these games. I bet Dungeons and Dragons would have caused him to go to want to commit suicide. Not the drug use or the depression or the dealing with being a homosexual male in the
It was just
early 80s,
happenstance
late
that he
70s.
went to that place to try to do it.
Yeah, he went to probably somewhere out of the way so no one would notice him trying to commit suicide. Basically, well, that's no one knows for sure why he did it there, but
In this era in America, and even now still, people are like, oh, we need a reason other than the obvious reason.
that's why I chose this one because it's a less controversial way to talk about moral panics. In the future, I'd like to talk about more moral panics and how people freak out. And D&D is the easy one because D&D is not very political. It's not guns. It's not religion. But I mean,
Well, a little bit religion.
well, a little bit,
Yeah, we mix
but
a little bit
it's
in.
not as controversial. But anyways, so he eventually follows Ibra all over the country, finds he's in Louisiana, and eventually he finds him, takes him, gets him, takes him back. And eventually, unfortunately, the bad news is 1 year later, Egbert does commit suicide by gunshot. So he did
Oh.
eventually succeed in killing himself, sadly enough. And this was the first of many, many strings. So just like how back in the day, when you always heard, I don't know about you, Ray, but I always heard like, oh, if you listen to a certain album backwards, it says worship Satan or worship the devil or all that stuff, right?
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, you
Like the
remember that,
Wizard of
yeah.
Oz, like there's a munchkin hanging and one of them
Exactly. Or
visits and
always
stuff like
sorts of
that.
weird stuff like that. If you listen to it backwards, or if you listen to a quarter speed, or a lot of stuff that we couldn't do back in the day because yeah.
Marilyn Manson took out his bottom rib so he could
Oh,
suck
he's
his
a
own
genius
dick.
for that. Anyways, if we could do that, we wouldn't need women. Anyways, so this was the first noted where people like a lot of urban legend like, oh, if you play D&D in steam tunnels, you'll die, or you go to the sewer and play D&D, you die, or you play D&D and then Satan asks you, demands you kill yourself, and all these other stupid shit, right? And then during the 80s, what starts picking up? Satanism. The actual Satanism is a somewhat mainstream religion, is picking up too, and people are like, oh shit, they're Satanists. That's a Satanist. Oh, you cause people to kill people, and you rip the heads off of chickens, and you're corrupting the youth by making them listen to Judas Priest and stuff, and all these other completely unfounded things. And then, sure enough, every single time a person who happens to play D&D, another one by the name of Irvin Pulling, I'll give as an example, he shoots himself, and he had played Dungeons and Dragons. He shoots himself in 1982, and a lot of people are like, oh, D&D is causing these kids to kill themselves. It's a devil's game, and among other things in D&D, yes, there are devils and demons, and there are magic spells. All three of those things are awesome, and I cast my magic missile at the darkness. There's like three nerds out there laughing, and the rest of you are like, "What the fuck is Rene talking about?"
I just rolled my eyes so much that they're getting hard to go back in
Ray
the right
permanently
spot
looks.
right now.
No, actually, you're still permanently leaning a little to the right, just like my penis.
Damn it,
Just
I'm
like
the
my
guy on
penis.
Caddyshack. Damn it.
My penis is just like the guy from Caddyshack as well. And the reason why I bring up Irving Pulling is because his mom was Patricia Pulling.
He was the guy that
He was
killed
the
himself
second
by
guy.
gunshot,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
second guy. Okay.
And she was very upset that her son killed himself, and she thoroughly believed that he killed himself because of Dungeons and Dragons. Because the investigator from the first guy, William Deere, he went around telling people, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure D&D causes this. D&D causes this." Ironically, in 1984, he'd write a book describing this, describing his studies, because it became a pretty famous, like, criminal investigator. Well, he was the investigator. He was the one who's trying to find Egbert.
But why? But do they think that you guys like conjure demons during the game? Like I've played the game before. You don't do anything like that.
You have to remember also, this is the rise of evangelical Christianity. Actually, nice, perfect segue, Ray. Strong work. It's like you've done
Thank
this
you.
before. You've podcasted. Yeah,
Like
you have some
ESPN
strong
or
ESPN
something.
El Ocho. So, but yeah, in the 80s, we have the moral majority, rising evangelical Christianity definitely becoming very mainstream as evangelical Christianity. And, this is, even though this might be a little bit of political points true, as evangelical Christianity gained more mainstream acceptance, they start pushing their weight around, pushing their moral and ethical agenda. And anything they thought was counterproductive. And classic evangelical Christianity says, "Oh nope, you got to worship the way we do. No, anything different, spell casting, all this is heresy. Basically, this is not cool." And so they were feeling that in general America was becoming more corrupt in the 80s. They were pointing to, like you said, they were making scapegoats of everything. And it's easy to make scapegoats of the guys with the high pitched voices, the loud hair, and the tight leather doing all the drugs. It's easy to make fun of the nerds in the back room playing the game where they create these weird fantasy characters and cast spells and stuff. And it's easy to say, "Oh, hey, this kid played D&D and he committed suicide too. This guy summoned a demon in the steam tunnels, and the demon convinced him to kill himself." Stupid shit like that. And then
Mm-hmm.
in 1982, a movie based off off the James Dallas Egbert, lack of a better word, case, comes out called Mazes and Monsters. Obviously, Dungeons and Dragons. It's all about college students role playing their game in like the sewers and all the weird shit they get into. It's actually funny enough because it might be worth checking out, because otherwise I'd say it's a stupid movie, whatever. But a young Tom Hanks is in the movie. Yes,
Really? Mazes and Monsters.
a young Tom Hanks is one of his first roles. He's the main character. He's the main character. This is
Oh,
not
he
like, oh,
is.
there's Tom Hanks in scene 13. No, he's the main character. Yeah, so first of all, big shout
That's
out to
very
Tom Hanks in
interesting.
general. You know what? If you're listening to this podcast, and I know you are, big shout out, bro. I loved you in Castaway.
Wilson.
Uh, are you Tom Hanks, Ray? Have you been Tom Hanks this whole time?
I sounded.
I
I
I
sounded
had
like
I had to do a
Rene.
double
That was
take because I
good,
was like, oh
wasn't
my
it?
god,
I
I can tell.
practiced that a lot.
I can tell.
Wilson.
That does make sense. Most of Ray's friends are inanimate objects. It's all good. Anyway, so in the 80s, you can see there's a lot of big publicizing of this. That, there's this weird game called Dungeons and Dragons, and this kid killed himself. And also, what's taking off in the 1980s is Dungeons and Dragons itself. So in 1979, this whole kid disappearing, James Ellis Egbert disappearing, happens in 1979. You know what happens in 1980? Dungeons and Dragons sales quadruples, because people are like, I gotta check
Oh.
this out. This is the weird Satanist
Yeah.
game, and eventually, people play it and they like it, and it got popular. I mean, there's a scene in E.T. in 1982. They're playing the game, and this is contemporary back then. I know a lot of people talk about like Stranger Things and Critical Role and all this other stuff now, but even back then, it was a big deal. And just like anything else that
Mm-hmm.
is not necessarily easy to explain at first, and involves the fantasy or the occult or stuff that's not, that's nerdy or lame or not mainstream, it's easy to stigmatize it. So people say, "Hey, it's wrong," and there's something wrong with it. In fact, one famous of this was, have you ever heard of Jack Chick, Ray? Out of curiosity, I don't, so
No,
So he was a
why?
very famous cartoonist, but he would publish what he called chick tracts. Chick tracts are these little like short comic strips. Like you can think of like Sunday morning cartoon, like Garfield and all that. Like and each one was on a different thing. Like and he's a classic hellfire and brimstone type of evangelical Christian. Like if you are gay, you're going to hell. If you don't go to church every
Hmm.
Sunday, you're going to hell. If you're Roman Catholic, you're going to hell. He was big anti-Catholic. If you're a Jew, you're going to hell. Well, one of his chick tracks will end up being called Dark Dungeons, and it's all about these two women. Yes, yes, women play Dungeons and Dragons. Shut up, Ray. Stop rolling your eyes. Um, she did play
I
it
played it
once, and
once.
actually, her
It was
character was
alright.
named the Gobbler, so that's where that comes from.
That was
Well,
my AKA today. Should I explain the gobbler now, or should I
eh,
wait?
no, let's not. Don't explain it. Don't explain it. Anyways, but like in the story, these two people they get really into D&D, and one of the girls ends up killing herself because her character dies, but the other one escapes away and converts to evangelical Christianity, and she is saved away from the dark D&D cult. So it just goes to show, yeah, yeah, it just goes to show, yeah. And so this
Wow.
is kind of like, and there's a lot of like 60 Minutes does a big piece in the middle of the 80s, and there's all sorts of like anti D&D stuff going out, and that's why I bring in Patricia Pulling. If you I don't know if you remember the name of the gentleman who killed himself in A2, Irving Pulling. Well, that's not a coincidence. It's his mom, and
Yes.
so she, in her grief, and this happens to all of us when we're grieving, we don't want the complex answer. We want a simple answer. Why did my son kill himself? And I don't blame her as a mom of trying to find answers. Well, eventually, she thinks that Dungeons and Dragons is what killed her son because remember, just 2 years ago, this high-profile missing person, he ended up killing himself over Dungeons and Dragons, and there's a couple other people who played Dungeons and Dragons, and they all killed themselves. And so she's like, "This is what happened." So she sues TSR, which is the company at the time who ran Dungeons and Dragons. It was founded by the founders, and even sues the high school principal because he not only
What?
introduced the game, but the principal, Robert Bracey the third, placed a curse on her son by playing this game with his students. Because yes, you can place curses in the game, but they cause you to not be able to hit your opponent, not make them want to kill themselves. Because exactly,
Right.
so she starts a group called BAD, BADD. This is a lot like MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Bothered about Dungeons and Dragons. This is her public advocacy group. I am
Stop
not making
it.
that up, Ray. I am 100%.
Bad. I hope that Michael Jackson song was like their little
No,
like
these people
theme
are not
song.
cool enough to for no, not even cool enough. Um,
Not
no,
even
not
cool
even
enough for
close,
that was
not even close.
Hitler.
And he loved to diddle people, or
Hmm.
really just children. So she sues everybody. She sues the principal. She sues TSR. She sues basically, and so because they believe that D&D encourages devil worship and suicide. In fact, a quote from them is D&D is a fantasy role-playing game which uses demonology, witchcraft, voodoo, murder, rape, blasphemy, suicide, assassination, insanity, sex perversion, homosexuality, prostitution, satanic type rituals, gambling, barbarism, cannibalism, sadism, desecration, demon summoning, necromantic divination, and other teachings.
Holy shit, Renee. So when I played Dungeons and Dragons, none of this was involved. Were we playing the right game? Because your game sounds way better.
She makes so Patricia Pulley makes around. She actually goes on 60 Minutes with Ed Bradley opposed by Gary Gygax, who's one of the founders of D&D.
And they take this seriously. Come on.
No,
I
it's
can't believe
Ray. I was
this.
watching this. These people like were a lot of people. You have to remember too. This isn't like nowadays where like being nerdy is cool or hey, I play video games or this is back in the day where like if you played video games, you were the guy who lived at the bottom of your mom's basement and didn't do anything or and like didn't get any sunlight.
Hmm.
So this was just a weird game. It's like, oh, this is not old. This is not American. This is what's wrong with these people. What's really funny is a quick aside. Gary Gygax, very religious, and he's also one of the
Yes.
founders of D&D. Yeah, he was very. I don't know his religion, but several times he even talks about, and he would even talk about like, or they would have like they would he would he was a big promoter of the game, obviously, because it was partially his baby, but also he's like, yeah, it's so funny how literally they founded this game because they used to play war games, and rather than playing war games where you play armies against each other, they wanted to play a game where you were these individual characters, and they like fantasy, they like Tolkien. So they love Lord of the Rings, and that's what they based a lot of it off of.
Oh, I love Lord of the Rings.
And so it's just funny that you have this religious guy who just wanted to have fun with his friends and create his own game, and now he's making money off of it. But now people are trying to get it basically canceled, for lack of a better word. Yeah,
Saying that he's
he's
like this
he must be this demonic
person.
Satan worshiper when in fact he himself is Christian. And I mean, it's just like everything else. You know, they're having all these moral panics in the 80s because they're trying to find a way to say, oh, this isn't like the good old days back in, you know, when everyone worshiped and feared God like we do. You know, you got this, you got drug use, you got murder, you got gang violence, you have drugs, you have all these things, and they're trying to point fingers at everything. And D&D was easy because again, even though it's getting more popular in the 80s, it's still very niche. I mean, even today, even though there are supposedly millions of players, a lot of times when I say I play in D&D, most people are like, oh, that's it. Either they don't know what it is, or like, oh, that's weird. Every once in a while, like, oh, that's cool, or like someone's like, oh, like I actually have a couple people like, oh, that's interesting. I'd like to play sometime. How do you play? But most people are like, oh, that's weird, or oh, that, or just chuckle. You know, it's a game. It's a kid's game, and it is what it is.
Most of them respond by saying, "Sir, can you put your pants back on?"
I've been told that I am no longer allowed at the public playgrounds. As it goes on, so she starts this whole campaign throughout the 80s.
So she, the leader of bad.
Yeah, the leader of bad.
Okay. What is that called? Bitches Against Dungeons and Dragons.
You know what? That's what it's about. That's what it's named now. Bitches Against Dungeons and Dragons. So Bitches Against Dungeons and Dragons. They go on a media campaign, and you even hear Pat Robertson and all these other, you know, all the other televangelists. They'll talk about, oh yeah, that D&D game. That's what they, and because these people aren't critically thinking too. They're not going out and let me buy a copy. Let me see what this looks like. You know, it's easy to say, oh, that game's, well, for devil worshippers, people want to kill themselves. They're not actually looking at the material and
why logically think?
Not, why critically think? Why not just say, oh yeah, that's something outside my immediate worldview. I'm going to chastise it and shun it. Let's not be open-minded one way or another. So, funny enough, as the 80s go on, I want to come to 1989, another book called Game Hysteria and the Truth. And basically, it looks into this phenomenon. It's written by Michael A. Stackpole. And he starts pulling in all the everything, the evidence that Patricia Pulling and other evangelical Christians have that causes suicide, studies that have been done, because of course, and of course, you know, there are the CDC and the American Association of Suicidology, which I did not know was a thing until I started doing research on this episode.
Suicidology? I didn't even know that was a word.
I didn't know that was a word. You know, today's word of the day is suicidology. Every time you hear it, scream. So exactly. But anyway, so you have all this going on, and so he brings in all this evidence. At first, he sees a lot of the suicides because yes, there were people who play D&D who committed suicide. Yes, there's people who do everything that commit suicide.
Think of all the college athletes and stuff now that have been on the news committing suicide.
Yeah, I mean, exactly.
Horrible, but...
It is. So he compiles all this, and then he also looks at studies done by all these organizations. And basically what the math and the data shows is that actually people who play D&D commit suicide less than the average person of their same age.
Really?
And it actually kind of makes sense when you think about it. Because remember I said,
Suck it,
you get together. Yeah, it's good for your mental health. No, and so like legitimately, it makes sense when you think about it. You're getting together, most likely with your friends. It could be, and there's random D&D games. You know, you go to a hobby shop. You go play with your friends, your family, you know, some people even go to the library, churches and stuff, and they play it with people they know. And you're getting out, you're socializing, and at the end of the day, you're trying to win. And there's not really a win-lose thing, but everybody wins, because the idea is that you achieve whatever your objective is in the game.
There's a lot of tactics involved, too, and brain power.
There's a lot of tactics. Yeah, it involves thinking and using your imagination And I know every time I've played a game, I've left feeling good because I've played with my friends. Not just that I'm hanging out with my friends, but it's fun to see what ideas they come up with, how they circumvent things, how they do certain things, how we talk about things. And it's a social thing. It gets people, and I can imagine too, for a lot of people who probably were geeky or nerdy, it gets them in a social situation that they may normally not be comfortable with, as a way to ease people in to social interaction. And it's
Inclusive,
it's a
an all
positive.
inclusive game.
It's very inclusive. It's very inclusive because if you want to play a 9 foot tall transgendered amorphous creature who fucking can chop people in half, you can. If you want to play a fucking 2 foot tall fairy who can throw spells and slay dragons, you can. And so I can imagine too, it's popular amongst a lot of communities too, because it doesn't matter what race you are, because you can come up with your own. You could be a woman and be the physically strongest, toughest, smartest member of the party, or you could be a man and be the it'd be okay if your character's a little more effeminate or a little a little more emotional, because that's your character, that's how you design them. It's good.
Mm-hmm.
It's good. It leads to the role play session. That between this and then eventually Patricia Pulling quitting Bad in 1989, the hysteria kind of starts dying off in general. And by 1991, there's position statements by multiple health organizations, multiple psychiatric associations saying there is no link at all between these two things
It's so
whatsoever.
dumb.
And I mean, it's dumb as shit. Let's be honest. But this whole episode's been dumb as shit, if you want to be
Just
honest.
wasted like
But
time just saying that something is the. I just people just need to mind their own business and just shut up.
people need to relax and gobble some cocks.
They need to gobble some cocks. Although I feel for the lady that founded Bad, because her son did commit suicide.
6 years after she, about 6, 7 years after she left Bash, she herself died of lung cancer. So
Oh
so who knows if she was ill during the time too? And I don't feel bad for
no,
her.
I mean people grieve
And
differently, but they.
especially because at certain points this was a one woman army
Mhm.
essentially. And if this was her way of grieving, you know what? In the end, obviously, it didn't do much damage in the long term to D&D, because now there's literally millions of people who
Probably
play it
helped
in
D&D.
America, let alone around the world. Yeah, actually, yeah, all the controversy, actually, a couple times the sales went up a lot and really helped the company in general. In fact, actually, in the late '90s, when there was no controversy, is when sales lagged and TSR ended up selling the game to its current owner, Wizard of the Coast, because there really wasn't much
Hmm.
controversy. Things kind of lagged and the game was stagnant. So all the controversy and everything actually did help the game. And I mean, now it's a big thing. Celebrities play it. I could list off 100 famous people who play this
Is it
game.
anyone that I know,
And
Rene? Honestly.
Stephen Colbert,
Oh yeah, I know who that is.
Vin Diesel.
Vin Diesel doesn't know how to read. He can't play Dungeons and Dragons.
You want to actually hear some real quick aside, and this is a little piece of trivia. This is not really the episode. You know Riddick, the Chronicles of Riddick
Yeah.
and Pitch Black and all that. Riddick is his D&D character.
Really?
Yeah, that's why he's so passionate about it. It's his passion project. But Riddick is based off his D&D character. Yeah, he's a huge D&D player. The Rock has played D&D.
I'm very
Yeah,
surprised.
Joe Magliano, I can't say his name. He plays a lot of famous
Tough
people, like
guys.
legitimately, yeah, like actual big strong guys. Drew Barrymore's played D&D.
Well, I mean, she's been in E.T. where they were playing it,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
it
exactly,
all
yeah,
connects.
yeah.
Circle of life.
There's a lot of this, and in general, like, so real quick aside, and I'm gonna use this aside as a way to show you where D&D is today, because this is my own personal experience with it, to show you that this is very, I would say, actually in some ways a wholesome game. So I was playing with a friend at a game shop, another game, when they said, "Oh, hey guys, there's a group coming. They have that table reserved." Oh, okay. So we move our stuff, and it's a family. It looks like two brothers, maybe late 30s, early 40s, and they bring their kids and they're playing D&D with them. These kids range anywhere from like about 6 to 12, 13, and they're playing, they're having their fun, they're all getting into it. They take a break after a while, and they come over and they see the game we're playing, and D&D uses miniatures, and the game we're playing uses miniatures. And this little girl about 11, she goes, "Oh, that's cool. can I see that? I go, sure, sweetheart. So I hand it to her. She goes, this is mine. This is my character. And so we're just talking. And her dad comes over and starts talking about the game we're playing. We're talking to them. And they're talking about the characters are created. And you have these young kids who are using their minds, their imaginations, to just have fun with basically their dad and their uncle.
That's nice.
And if that's not wholesome, I don't know what is. I mean, that's good family
better
values.
Than taking your kid to the bar to get loaded, and then they have to drive you home at 6 years old.
That's what
happens.
Dad. Anyways, so that's it. That's it about Dungeons and
Rene
Dragons.
did a good job. I wasn't bored or anything, I promise.
Yeah, she only twice fell asleep. She only once got up and left to get herself a drink. She, you know, our stiff drink. Our female viewership went down a lot this episode, but overall, I hope y'all learned something. Y'all learned something about Satanism, about D&D, and you know they're not as bad as either one of them think they are.
All right.
Hail
was
Satan.
A great episode.
Anyways, that was a great episode.
All right, we will see you next time for our next episode.
We'll see you next time, and on our next episode, we will kill chickens and worship Satan.
Yes, our next episode. Have a good one.